move my slides. There we go. I got my little arrow. um, and I just wanted to, first of all, we're Wild Rivers Land Trust is a conservation organization, and we're located in Port Orford, but we work all up and down the coast. There's 2.3 million acres in our service area. You can see over on the left, and we're the local land trust, but we work with a lot of other conservation partners. Like we just worked on a transaction. The Nature Conservancy transferred some land to us to manage up at Nasika Beach, and we're also working with the Conservation Fund on a Port Orford watershed protection project. So we're working on some really different things. Although 2020 was a kind of an awful year for a lot of us, we had our most productive year. So we closed 4 transactions last year, and I'm just thrilled that we can keep our work going really unabated. So we just some other updates. We finished a wildlife photo contest. So if any of you are wildlife photographers and want to participate in our event next year, check out information. We'll have something up probably by May or June on our website, and our website's listed below. One of the key components of our work is building resiliency against climate change, and conservation is a great way to do that. But can you see the little arrow that I'm moving around? I don't know.
Yeah, it comes through.
Okay. I just wanted to point out some of the things I'm going to be talking about. Is the Wall Ranch is right here on the Elk River. And so I'll be talking about what they're doing in regenerative ranching a little bit later. But, we have some new conservation easements down at, like I said, at Nasika Beach, north of Gold Beach. And then another one called Raven Ridge, which is out near this number 6. It's not number 6, but it's near there. So we're doing some great projects. And like I said, climate resiliency is a huge part of what we're trying to build into the ecosystems on the coast. So I just want to first of all provide the big picture of what's going on in greenhouse gas emissions. We're going to be talking about agriculture tonight, but there's a lot of other things that contribute to us. So we have a lot of work to do in changing the way we live in other ways, but there's a really helpful story in agriculture, so I'll share that with you tonight. One of the things that I absolutely loved hearing during the Democratic debates was about regenerative agriculture, not once, but not twice, but several times during the Democratic debates, that these people were very well versed in this new way to fight climate change. And it was a really hopeful thing for me. I thought, this is fantastic. It's on the radar screen in a big way. So I'll just kind of go in. I think a lot of us understand how sort of our sort of modern industrial age of agriculture is really kind of failing. It's no longer profitable or sustainable in many different ways. And, I was just talking, before we started tonight, that this really only has happened since the 30s, 40s, where a lot of these not so great things have been happening in agriculture, but we're at a point where we can turn these things around. A lot of the costs are increasing. Our soils are horribly degraded. We're losing water reserves, and we're just highly vulnerable to climate change and the environmental problems that have come up. So a lot of consumer trends are wanting food that's clean and green and healthy, and the promise of regenerative agriculture is going to bring us there. So quickly, prices have increased for fertilizer, fuel, and seeds over the years. This is talking about, organic versus conventional. Conventional is red, organic is in the green and purple. And, you don't need to use a lot of chemicals and fertilizers. Organic farming has really, kind of come of age and can be just as productive. Also, one of the major problems is the use of herbicides has caused a number of weeds to become resistant to these herbicides, and so a lot of these products no longer work, and they actually push us in a direction that is not very productive. So. And lastly, about a third of the Earth's land surface is in grasslands. And I'll be talking a lot about grasslands tonight. And of that third, 70% of those have been pretty dramatically degraded. And this has, because of a number of different things, but a lot of it is just overgrazing and the way that we manage animals on the land. So this is the point that I want to kind of get to in just a minute. So how bad is it? This talk is going to kind of focus a lot around soil, but the organic matter in a lot of the soils, particularly in the Midwest, has dropped dramatically from, we'll say, an average of 10% to less than 2%. So this is, the amount of organic matter that drives fertility and water absorption. In many places, 3 to 5 feet of topsoil has been lost in the Midwest, which is our breadbasket, and along with it, a lot of the productivity. Also, there have been increases in, the need to use more water, fertilizer, herbicides, pesticides, and has just not been particularly a positive trend as of late. And, really, we're very susceptible to drought. We have more droughts. We have kind of these super weeds that are, sort of herbicide resistant, and a lot of pests as well. And a lot of the resilience in our farming communities has dropped as well. So there are far fewer small and moderate sized farms. They've had to sell out to these large corporate farms. And this really changes the face of the families and communities, farming communities in these areas. A lot of these small communities are just dying because there are no small and medium-sized enterprise farms and ranches. And, really disturbing are the crash of a lot of these different ecosystems, the pollinators, but beneficial insects, and, sort of these monoculture crops, and water pollution, and just the amount of water available for irrigation has really dropped. So, this is sort of an industry in crisis, but there are some solutions. And like I said, during the Democratic debates, and even more so just recently with the new administration, they have been talking about some of these things to repair these lands and to make them productive again. For us in the conservation world, we tend to work on the green protect and the blue restore. But more recently, we've started working with, these really great farmers and ranchers that are looking at ways to sequester carbon on their lands and have their lands become more productive as well. So we're working in sort of this managed middle phase as well. And it's really exciting. And that's what I'm hoping you'll get excited about too, is that if you look at the number of megatons of carbon dioxide captured, I don't know if you can see those numbers in sort of that green area. It says manage croplands better. that's a really big number, especially when you start looking to the right and the left. That in managing grazing lands along with that, that's getting up into the protect forests and restore forest range as far as the impact that it can provide. So, what is regenerative agriculture? I'll try to get you grounded in this new science here. And it's really about practices that maximize the potential for moving primarily CO2, but other greenhouse gases into the soil. And the tool that the soil uses are plants. So this is really moving carbon out of the atmosphere and driving it down into the soil, into stable forms that can sequester it there. You know, there are a lot of advantage to of carbon farming, as well as, you know, increasing the filtration of water, but also the water holding capacity of these soils. They turn into, when you get the organic matter up, they start to turn into big sponges. And this creates a lot of resiliency against drought as well as floods, because if you get a lot of water and you have a big sponge, it'll absorb a lot of that water and will reduce the amount of erosion. But also for drought, you have this great resiliency built in. So it's really about increasing the soil health, and one of them is just increasing the organic matter in the soil. So my first career was a chemist, so you're going to have, this will be the geekiest thing you see tonight. So I love my chemistry background, but really, how do plants take a gas out of the atmosphere and put it into the soil? So this is the process that we need to understand. So it's photosynthesis. And, you know, going back to your high school biology class, plants take carbon dioxide and water from the ground, carbon dioxide from the air, and they convert using solar energy and their little factories in the plant leaves that contain chlorophyll, and they convert the CO2 and water into sugars, these little carbohydrates that provide the building blocks for the plant. But as we're going to discover tonight, they provide a lot of little sugar goodies to all the creatures that live in the soil. So this is a really fantastic sort of symbiotic relationship that we'll explore. And thankfully, they produce oxygen. So down at the bottom, GHG stands for greenhouse gas, because some mechanisms take nitrogen out of the air as well, and fix it into the soil, which is a great thing for fertility. So, you know, we're taking greenhouse gases with water. Our little green plant is turning it into what I'll call liquid carbon, which is sort of the plant sap. You know, and it also builds leaves and, you know, the stems and whatnot, and creates oxygen for everyone else to benefit from. So, all right. So what is soil? You know, it's not dirt. So I'll make that distinction. Soil is made up of a whole bunch of different types of minerals. And, you know, the sort of the secret sauce is this organic matter. It's essentially, you know, rotted plant material that creates these carbon products in the soil. And there's a number of soil enzymes. And the one thing that I really want to talk a lot about tonight is the microbial communities in the soil. They've created this great symbiotic relationship with the plants that the bacteria, fungi, protozoa, the worms and insects, they provide, primarily the bacteria and fungi provide nutrients to the plant, make them bioavailable is the term. And the plant gives them these little carbohydrate sugar goodies that the bacteria and fungi feed on. So, a lot of what drives a lot of the function for plant growth is in the amount of organic matter that is, contains bacteria, fungi, minerals, and organic matter all working together. And it's a living thing. It's not dead. So I just want to have a little schematic here to summarize some of this, that actually we always sort of key in on what's happening above the soil with our plants, but a lot of the action is actually in the ground. So as I said before, plants, take solar energy and CO2, and they pull water, from the soil, and they convert all of that into this carbohydrate sugars that are down in the roots. And down here, it's feeding this whole community of beneficial microorganisms that actually greatly benefit the plant. So this is another way to look at it, as sort of a soil food web. You've got all kinds of bacteria and fungi and all of these things. There's a lot of beneficial insects as well. And, you've got your random mold that's sort of tunneling around and loosening up the soil. So, what does this look like? So mycorrhizae is a type of fungi, and up on this top part, they actually they actually go into this. This is a piece of a root hair, and there's this little network of fungi, and it actually pierces the roots to get these sugars out. But these fungi provide a lot of nutrients. They support bacteria as well that actually really support plant growth. So you can see kind of these two different root balls. So one of them looks, dramatically larger than the other one. Another picture of roots are these little nodules. There are certain types of plants that harbor fungi, but also bacteria. Nitrogen fixing bacteria is what they're called, and they actually take nitrogen, and they actually put nitrogen into the soil, which is nitrogen is a nutrient. That's what people like to spread nitrogen containing fertilizers on their fields, is because nitrogen is one of those critical nutrients. But if you grow the legumes and peas and beans and things like that, they actually produce this nitrogen and put it into the soil. So soil is a lot of different things. There's a living component, and there's sort of the fresh stuff on top that maybe sort of like composting residue on top. And then there's a great deal of decomposing matter in there. I mean, this part does produce some CO2 as it decomposes, but it eventually becomes a stabilized organic piece of soil that does not, it actually holds carbon in the soil. Okay, this is a really busy one, but I just want to focus on this piece right in the middle here. It says healthy soil has amazing water retention capacity. For every 1% of organic matter that you put increase in your soil, it allows 25,000 gallons of water to be absorbed per acre. So, as you increase the organic matter in your soil, you have this incredible sponge-like capacity of that soil to hold water. And in agriculture, especially now with a warming climate, that is one of the biggest problems that they have. So this is a real big key to building resiliency into these systems. All right. So where does this this is not new. It's just kind of getting back to what nature has been doing for a long time. Some of these principles, at each of these points, are what regenerative agriculture does. So it limits the disturbance of the soil. Nature doesn't go around each year with a rototiller and churn up the soil. It doesn't like to do that. And what that actually does is it kills all of those great things growing in the soil. So, limit disturbance. So, this is no till, permaculture. Those are the types of terms that are used. You armor the soil surface. Bare soil in nature is not necessarily, normal. Nature likes to compost, and it likes to cover bare soil because it's for plant growth. Erosion is not beneficial. Washes all those nutrients away. And nature doesn't grow just one thing. When you go out into a sort of an area of undisturbed prairie in the Midwest, it's this incredibly diverse number of plants, and they the diversity has been shown that these plant communities with a lot of different types of plants are actually healthier than if you just planted one or two of them. So they help support each other. One of the things that every year nature doesn't go around and pull up all the roots out of the ground or rototill them into the soil. Keeping living roots in the soil is what keeps that conversion of solar energy and CO2 with the plant going down into the soil and feeding all of those microbes in the soil. So you'll hear about cover crops and things like that. That is to keep on maximizing the amount of energy and CO2 that gets sequestered in the soil as organic matter and feeds these soil microbes. And then the last one is a little bit this one was not intuitive to me. But you have to go back and look at the evolution of life. The Great Plains used to have enormous herds of buffalo and antelope and elk and deer, all of these herbivores. And the plants really co-evolved with the animals. So there were these massive herds of animals that were grazing, constantly grazing, these areas. And it actually stimulates the plant to produce more of these sugars and to grow, as well as the animals moving across, laying down dung and urine and everything that enhances those soils. So a lot of these lessons are taken from, what sort of a natural system expresses. So what does this look like? There was a drought in 2012 in the Midwest, and they compared different land practices and how they were doing. So these are two fields that are next to each other. The one on the left was, they still tilled the soil every year. Looks like they have, sort of a good sort of compost layer down there, but they've got some weeds I see too. And then the one on the right, they used a no-till process. And then they also grew cover crops when they weren't growing soybeans. So they had all of those living roots continually putting energy back into the soil that builds the soil. So you can see these two different fields are dramatically different. Also, obviously the one on the right has a lot more water stored in it. So it can handle a drought a lot better. I want to spend just a little bit of time on, this grazing concept. And again, this came from a guy that was observing how Africa was changing. Alan Savory, he observed all of these millions of grazing animals on these savannas in Africa, and how incredibly healthy all of those grasslands were, even with millions of animals on them. When people started doing cattle farming, putting up fences and sort of, constraining the cattle to one area, and they tended to overgraze. And, they were just left to their own devices to just sort of wander around the property randomly. Well, he says, why are, millions of animals, on these grasslands not degrading the land like these much fewer cows are doing? And it was really how the animals moved on the land. The natural system had a lot of predators and kept these animals moving. So these animals were constantly moving. They would graze and trample grass, and they kind of poop and pee on that ground, putting some nutrients in, but they moved on. So they didn't overgraze any particular area. And it was this movement of animals that kept rejuvenating the grasslands. And, the picture on the right shows, on the far right is where cattle have just been sort of mismanaged, I'll say. On the left-hand side, they managed their cattle by moving them, to new areas every few days, and kept them moving across this, and it allowed the land to recover and rejuvenated those plants. So, this is the modern term is called mob grazing. And a lot of people have switched over to using this type of grazing for not only for animal production, but to rejuvenate their land. This is a healthy, way to rejuvenate your land. So you can see on the left, the cows just left that area. They grazed it down. The key to this is high intensity. You can see how many cows are jammed into this small area, but they want the cows to completely graze off that entire area, and then they'll move them. So they'll move them at least once a day to a new plot, and they'll just keep moving them, and they will just keep rotating them around. And it might be another 30 days or so, over a month, maybe 45 days before they hit that patch on the left again. So it's actually a way to grow soil is to move these high intensity grazers across them, but not have them sit there for, months, sort of overgrazing. And this can be extrapolated to any number of animals. People use chickens, geese, turkeys. They even have mixed herds of like sheep and cows. They found that if they do this, they have fewer problems with parasites because of the dynamics of sheep not being susceptible to a parasite, and that actually eliminates it from the cows. But these are one way to eliminate parasites in animals is to keep them moving as well. They're not sitting in the same area eating and inhabiting that same area for a long period of time. So just very briefly, managing animals on the land can actually heal the land. The animals trample and eat the plants that stimulate them. And then because the plants are stimulated, the goodies and all the microbes in the soil are stimulated as well to make more soil. So this carbon is being pulled into the soil. It's being fertilized with manure and urine, which keeps all that going. The grass roots can penetrate much deeper as the soil gets healthier. These roots can, 100 feet in some cases, which makes them more resilient to stressors of water if they can tap into things much further down deep. Let's see. These animals are grazing right down to the very ground, these weeds, so that they are not grazing around them. They're actually eating them and eliminating them from that pasture. And then also, as I mentioned, the parasite cycles are interrupted. You can have 2, 3, 4 times as many animals per acre. So your production could be much higher, but those animals are also healthier. They're moving to new fresh grass or forage every day. And they're healthier because they don't have parasites. You don't have to give them the deworming pharmaceuticals and all that stuff. But they themselves have higher nutritive value because of this increased nutrient cycling. And you are what you eat. If you're eating healthier forage, then those animals are going to be healthier too. All right, well, I want to get into some examples very quickly. This fellow, Gabe Brown, he wrote a book called Dirt to Soil, and it's featured later. So get out a pen and pencil because I got some stuff I want you to write down. He documented this journey that he took over 20 years. He bought his in-law's farm, and it was marginal at best. This is in North Dakota. And the organic matter over his tenure, by using regenerative farming practices and using grazing is a really important part of it. He increased his organic matter in his soil. He had it tested when he started, 1.7%. It is now over 10%. 11%, that's an older book, so it's probably up to 12% already. Huge increase in organic matter and soil for fertility. When he first inherited this land, it could only, when it rained, it could only absorb about 1/2 inch per hour. It can now absorb 15 inches per hour. So if they get a cloud burst, before it would just run off and all that water would run away. Now it's soaking into the soil, and he's just created a giant soil sponge, which really adds a lot of resiliency as they go through these drought cycles. And it also, if it floods, you also have that carrying capacity of the soil to absorb all that water. He uses no tilling. He doesn't disturb the soil because it would kill all of those microorganisms. And he completely stopped using synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, and fungicides. So he doesn't have to buy those things, which are really expensive, but it actually kills the microorganisms in the soil. So it's a key part of regenerative farming, is not using these things. He's increased his cash crops and has really diverse cover crops and biodiversity in his fields. He's also increased the plant, insect, and bird diversity in his area. It's just, he says it's supporting a lot of beneficial insects, which would normally be killed using pesticides. To get rid of the pests, you have to kill the beneficial ones as well. So, and then it also feeds wildlife. He's seen an increase in deer and antelope and other animals that use his land. He has a lot of different livestock that he, uses on the land and to help grow this soil. And he has a really large, profitable, diverse sources of revenue. He has crops, he has forage, he has all those different animals, eggs. He planted fruit trees, nut trees, and then he's a big fan of pollinators, so he also has honey. And what's really interesting is that he takes no government subsidies. This is like unheard of in the land of farming, because there are so many subsidies. He doesn't need them because he doesn't have to buy fertilizers, pesticides, fungicides. He's sold a lot of his farm equipment. So he doesn't, he doesn't need to have all of this this overhead. And so what he calls it is nutrient dense stacking of enterprises. So he's maximized his sort of nutrient cycles into all of these diverse things that are on his land, and it's healed the land, the farm. It's much more fertile and sustainable. It's healed a lot of the families. There's less stress in a lot of the families because you're making more money. There's less stress. And then there's money to invest in the communities. They've made, pretty major investments in some of the core capabilities that they needed in their community. And there was enough capital when everybody joined in to actually make those things happen. So in our backyard, we also have one of the early adopters of regenerative ranching is the Wall family, and they've been in this area for hundreds of years. Pete Wall is one of the siblings that still owns the ranch. And this is, I think I pointed it out at the beginning of the talk. It's just on the Elk River, and they have 700 acres there. And some time ago, they said, we want to focus on soil health. Our land is getting degraded. There's this new paradigm of regenerating, the land, and they fully embraced this. And they are reaping the benefits of it now. It was a long, it takes some time. Like the Gabe Brown example was 20 years. It's about the same for the Wall family. But now they have increased fertility in their land. They use sheep. They're sheep farmer or sheep ranchers, and so they use their sheep to grow their soil through this grazing activity, and they use a variety of different crops. Pete calls it. He'll pull some up. He'll call it, the salad bar. Because they have, everything from radishes and turnips to all these different types of grasses. And all of this diversity really helps support all the different types of organisms in that soil. They don't till, they don't produce, they don't hay anymore. They used to, hay, have to produce hay because their land didn't have enough grass on it to feed the animals year round, but they've completely changed that. So they sold all their haying equipment. They don't have to maintain it. They don't even have to have a building to put the hay in. So, there's a bunch of things that you can kind of just jettison, including fertilizers and herbicides. The cool thing about what they're doing there is that they have 3 to 4 times as many sheep on the same, I think, fewer acres than they were using before. So they have, I think they're up to about 1,200 sheep on and they just use 30 acres of their 700 acre ranch. Now they may use different 30 acres every year, kind of rotating these animals around, but they have a far more profitable operation on a relatively smaller piece of land. So they don't put nitrogen fertilizer on there, but they do put some they'll spread some minerals. They'll spread the compost from the sheep barns out, just the sheep poop compost out onto the fields, a natural fertilizer. They use a lot of different cover crops to keep that sort of plant diversity really active. And they will find other things, to feed the sheep just to round out their diet. Believe it or not, over in the Willamette Valley, they'll have excess different types of beans or peas or whatever. they get on the phone, they're on the speed dial for these folks when they need to get rid of something like a bumper crop of peas. They're driving a truck over to the Willamette Valley and they're loading up their truck with these dried peas and they feed them to their sheep. So they actually use this to beneficial effect. So the benefits are their sheep are healthier. The way they rotate them on the land, they don't have to worry about parasites because they've interrupted the parasite cycle. So they don't need to use, the pharmaceuticals to treat them. So when you eat them, you're not eating those as well. The increased fertility of the ewes is really striking. You can tell how healthy sheep are by the number of lambs they produce. So, a not so healthy flock will have, one, maybe a some twins or a rare triplet. But their sheep routinely have triplets, quadruplets, quintuplets. Last year, I think they had 6 live births. All of those 6 lambs survived, which is just mind blowing. So these are really, really healthy animals, which is great. They have drought resistant. They sold they have irrigation equipment, but they haven't used it in years because their soil has turned into a big sponge. And yeah, some of the challenges are, you have to experiment. You have to change the way you operate and think. You have to really have a deep knowledge of the land, and you need to tinker. And it's great to talk to Pete about these things because he's really fine-tuned that. Just very quickly, there is sort of a fundamental change in the way producers are approaching this. Over on the right, I don't know if you know the Strauss is a dairy. And they are fully committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and increasing the amount of water retention in their soils. And they put it right on their bottles of milk. There are more and more of these producers that are fully embracing this as their, lifeline to keeping in operation. I never thought I would be saying this, but General Mills is really embracing regenerative agriculture, and it makes great business sense for them because they realize that if that the farmers they deal with are not fundamentally economically sound, and their lands are degraded, and they're susceptible to droughts or floods, and they have poor biodiversity and poor pollination on their lands, they're not going to have a good source of product in the future. So they realize that if they want to stay in business, they need to make sure that their farmers are staying in business and that they are profitable and the land is fertile and the soil is healthy. So I was pretty blown away by such a large corporation, but they have all of these metrics that they're tracking now. They're actually, spending millions of dollars to help get people to change over to using regenerative practices. So, they're kind of driving this. So just in summary, there are a lot of different things that make money sense to switch over to this, but it also makes them more resilient, financially resilient. The land is more resilient to climate challenges. They have, fewer costs, and they're able to sell into higher markets. But at the very bottom there is that more carbon is extracted out of the atmosphere and stored in the soil. And this is going to be a huge contributor to us addressing climate change. So yes, all of this makes business sense, but you know, the bottom line is that it's smart for you know, for the climate, or for the planet as well. So, you know, you could say, well, these are all farmers and ranchers, you know, that's what they do. But what can I do? You can buy food and meat from these farmers and ranchers. I get my vegetables from Valley Flora up in Langlis, as well as you know, I buy lamb from the Wall family. I want them to survive. I want to eat those products because they're healthier, and I encourage everyone else to do that too. All of us can compost. I'm composting. I'm putting in a garden in my just over my shoulder here, and I want to explore this soil health concept. And when I do my planting, I've bought my powdered mycorrhizal fungi to inoculate my soil with. When I put my plants in, I'm going to dust the little roots with them if I'm transplanting things, or add it to where the seeds are. You know, and really, you all can stop practices that destroy soil too. Stop using chemical fertilizers and herbicides and pesticides. And if you have a garden, consider using this no-till or permaculture concept. No rototilling. You can sell your rototiller to somebody that actually will pay you for it. And then lastly, I feel fortunate because I have retirement savings, and I started looking into what my money was invested in, and I was kind of shocked. I sold off one fund that someone many years ago said, you need to buy this mutual fund in energy. And I realized that I owned this, and I was kind of horrified that I was supporting the petrochemical businesses around the world. So I urge you to see what your things are invested in. There's really great alternatives now, so please do that. Okay, bottom line, we need to do more of this. Over on the right is the amount of emissions that we're cranking out now. And we need to optimize this sequestration in soils as well as other natural systems. But we also need to reduce our emissions. So let's rethink this. Just this is where you need your pen and paper. Some great videos of peat and the Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRCS. If you just type in peat wall and NRCS, these little video segments will pop up, and they're really kind of interesting. The one video that I saw, which is now years old, but is still very relative, it's a video called 100,000 Beating Hearts. Another great thing to watch. And 2 books, The Soil Will Save Us and Dirt to Soil. So I essentially everything that
really quick.
Yeah. Was someone speaking?
Yeah, I just want to see the last slide one more time.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. Thank you. I'm good now.
Okay, good. So with that, I'll open it up to, sorry, I kind of went over. I get excited talking about this. So I would really like to take questions. I will exit from the slide projector if everybody has finished writing down, you know, titles of books and things like that. So.
And I can remind people that we are recording this and we will post it on the SOCAN website. It'll take a little bit to get it all processed and everything, but it'll be up there if you want to come back and look at all the many things that Ann talked about, as well as this kind of information, which is pretty cool. Let me steal one thing right here to make it sort of validate that this is real. This is from today's New York Times. Different time of land man. You know, the New York City farmers just are eating this up. So just to sort of share that, in fact, it's it's really starting to take off. So we've been really lucky to have Ann give us this much time. And I'm going to shut up because there are a lot of really good questions that
Oh,
people
good,
started
good.
off. And Ann, would you want to, can you see this, the chat? Would you want to?
I can pull it up, yes. Yeah, so keep on hearing that beef cattle are a big contributor to climate change. You know, I think that Gabe Brown, you know, in that Dirt to Soil book, he says it's not so much the cows that are the problem, it's the way they're managed on the land. So, you know, please go back to pre-European history in the United States. There were, you know, lots of herbivores roaming the Great Plains. And, you know, they contributed, you know, some CO2. You and I contribute CO2 in every breath. So, you know, I think that I hear the criticism, and Gabe Brown, this sort of stalwart of regenerative agriculture, says that it's not the cows, it's the way that people manage them on the land. They can actually help you grow soil and put organic matter into the soil if you use them correctly. So they're they can be a tool, but they're also a piece of food too. So you could use chickens or goats or sheep or anything that will stimulate, eat the grass and stimulate the plants that are growing there. So I understand the criticism. So just make sure that you support responsible ranchers. Buy beef that is responsibly raised. That's what I would say. How can we encourage cities to practice regenerative growing in city parks? There are a number of community gardens. There's one in Port Orford here that I belong to. And a lot of them don't allow pesticides, herbicides. You know, you have to grow organically. So we're actually awaiting a big dump truck full of Pete's Magic sheep poop compost to put in our community garden. So he donates that, and it just jazzes up the soil. It's fantastic. You know, there's a lot of vacant lots. There's a lot of people that will just pitch in. You have to, of course, get permission from the owner of that vacant land. But you know, this is becoming more prevalent in urban areas.
And if I could jump in, that's Linda, these are the sorts of things that we're trying to encourage people to develop and such. So I encourage you to participate in 2 weeks from now, those discussions, so we can plan out how do we not only do it individually, but encourage other people to do it. Right.
So the next question is, how can our shopping habits, you know, sort of impact soils? Of course, you know, you can go to the organic veggie part of the grocery store. But what I really am encouraging people to do is to source their food from as close as you can to where you live. There are farmers markets. You can grow some of your own, even if you have just a little patio. You can grow, you know, in tubs and things like that. You know, I get a veggie share from Valley Flora, and they deliver to, you know, but look at the farmers markets, try to buy stuff that is locally produced. And I say that because most of our greenhouse gases are from transportation. So I've even started, you know, in COVID times, I started making my own bread. So, you know, I don't need that much bread, but I make, you know, about 2 loaves almost every week or every other week. And I give one away to a friend, you know, so they love that I've started baking. But I don't need to buy a loaf of bread that comes in a plastic wrapper from, I don't know where. I don't know where it comes from, but it comes in on a big truck. That's just one example. I'm not saying that you have to bake your own bread, but think about where your food comes from and what is the path to your table, and try to make that as short a trip as possible, because transportation of food is probably the largest contribution to greenhouse gases that, or a very big part of it anyway. So that's my recommendation. What about aquaponic farming? Yeah, there's some really cool things that you can do with fish, and you can have the fish, the fish poop in the water, and then you can take the water from the fish tanks to water your garden. Has all these nutrients in it. So a lot of sort of larger operations are trying to integrate in, say, tilapia, some type of fish production, but they use the water from the fish to fertilize their agricultural products, and then they can sell the fish. So I think that's what this person was getting at, the aquaponic farming. Let's see, scallions. Yeah, so it's a great way to use a natural fertilizer to grow your food and to grow your soil. Let's see, and please, I don't know if people can speak up, but if I'm not hitting the question right, or if you have a follow on, just let me know. If we vote with our dollars, we can vote by eating less beef, sure, and more organic veggies. I would counter that. At one point I thought, well, maybe I should just become a vegetarian. But after reading these books, again, it's how the animals are managed on the land. And these animals are actually helping to produce the soil at a much faster rate than if you just grew vegetables. So, so that meat guilt is sort of diminished in myself. I don't eat that much meat, but when I do, I try to eat meat that is responsibly produced, like the lamb at the Wall Ranch, or there are other ways to find certified, meat products that are responsibly produced. So, and I eat a lot of fish from our sustainable fisheries place here that promotes sustainable fishing. So I actually eat a lot more fish than I do meat. So let's see, aquaponic. Oh yeah, so the aquaponics, I mean, you could actually grow the roots, I think maybe in the like hydroponics. Maybe I got that wrong, but you can actually have the roots of the plants in the fish tank, and they take up nutrients. I'm not sure how the plants get all of the nutrients that they need. And I don't know how the bacteria and fungi live in those tanks. So, I mean, those are things that plants really need. But obviously it works to some extent. So
I'm in on that.
somebody can school me on that. Go ahead.
I'm part of the Rivers Permaculture Guild, and there's a number of people in the guild that do all these different things, like the aquaponics, that if you want to email, there's actually a number of people that are part of the head of that whole group, but there's, I think, a website I can put on the chat, or not a website, an email that you can email the whole guild. And any questions that you have, someone will respond to it with answers that they have. And like Kevin knows all about aquaponics, and like everybody has like a different niche of what they know. So if you have questions about like even small scale urban permaculture, I think I saw somebody asking about that. There's all kinds of things like resources and things that they can tell you about each of those things. And they're on Facebook, Wild Rivers Permaculture Guild. There's a large group on there, and then there's a small group, and then either of them you can add to the group and ask questions, and a lot of people will usually respond pretty quickly. The email sometimes is a little quicker or like a little bit more responsive, but it's incredibly helpful. And it's every person in that guild has so much information to share. It's incredible. Like I've learned so much from them in like the last 6 months alone. And there was actually a course that Ben Zumeta, he actually was running the food forest in the College of the Redwoods in Crescent City for a while. I think he has stepped aside recently, and there's a number of other people that are still keeping it going. But he's actually currently running a culture course that's actually specifically just for the guild members. But once we have finished our PDC, then there might be others that are going to offer the same course once they're knowledgeable enough to share the information, or he may offer another course later on in the future for more public people so that people can get educated on all this stuff, because it just goes on forever and there's so much great information.
I know. There's a lot to learn, and you know, it's really fascinating, I think. So so great. I'm not obviously not I don't know very much about that. But there are people, you know, here you go. Here's another speaker for your for your you know, speaker series that maybe somebody could you know, talk about that as a earth friendly farming practice. So yeah, thank you for that. That's fantastic information. I'm kind of small apartment gardening. Yeah, I know that's a challenge. But you can source some of your food from local growers. That's what I would say to do. Go to the farmers markets, or if you know somebody down the street that has, you know, chickens, you can buy some eggs from them. Or, you know, there's a lot of, once you start looking around, this is a pretty resourceful place, the South Coast. You know, when you start looking around, there's people that'll trade things, or you know, it's out there. So just start asking questions, especially to this what is it, the permaculture, the Wild Rivers Permaculture Guild. I'm sure they can get you all dialed into local producers. So okay, we've got some good websites, community composting at the, okay, great. A garden at the senior center. Oh, Ben Zamuda, is that right? At gmail.com is a good resource. Everybody can look at these with me. How can we select meat that's properly raised? First of all, there's certain types of certifications. You know, I get mine from the Wall family. It's called, I think it's called Wild Rivers Lamb. I should know this. It's, but you can buy it in certain places. You can get it at the co-op in Port Orford. I know a lot of you are down in Brookings, so there's has to be other people that produce meat in this way locally. But there's also, you know, start asking at your butcher counter at Fred Meyer or wherever you shop and say, hey, I want this. Can you get some? And they may be able to order some for you. They just need to know that people will buy it. Let's see. Okay, I'm just seeing people making comments. I'm looking for, questions?
So if you have individual questions, now is probably a good time to.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm having to scan this really
Yeah.
fast. So, you know, if somebody has a question, I can try to answer it. But there may be other knowledgeable people on the call that can help out. So.
Ed, I think that if you want to unmute yourself, I know you had asked about asking Ann a question. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I do. Ann, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Okay, first, I want to thank you for coming to us and talking about it. I feel extremely privileged to have somebody like you informing us of all of these details. It's an honor and a privilege. Before I ask my question, I have a real quick story I want to tell about General Mills. You commented about how surprised you were. When I was in the Navy, I was assigned to nuclear weapons. And I remember walking into a room one day and seeing this particularly bad nuclear weapon with General Mills stamped on the side of it. And I thought, oh, how funny, some sailors playing games. It wasn't a game. General Mills manufactured those things. So now on to my question.
Oh my God. Okay.
Or maybe one more statement. I just got David Attenborough's book, A Life on Our Planet. He published it last month or December. And it says the same things that you are saying about how grazing and open pastures, and he goes through all the same kind of things on the savannah about how it is properly held. But the question I have is, I got this publication from Project Drawdown. It's called Farming Our Way Out of the Climate Crisis. I don't know if you've heard about it or not, but I was wondering if you had any particular comments about that document. It's fairly, I printed it out. It's fairly long. It looks very detailed and very resource. Oh my gosh, the resources are very extensive.
Great. That I don't know about.
Okay.
So, but I will look into that. Thank you for it. It's always good to have good resources at hand. So, and I just recommend people reading those two books. The first one, The Soil Will Save Us. It took me a long time to get me to crack it open, because I was like, oh, soil, it sounds kind of boring, but it's actually a really interesting book. And it talks about Alan Savory and the coevolution of grasslands with grazers, and how they're kind of interdependent upon each other, the maintenance of grasslands with these grazers. Of course, now we graze cattle, but before it was other animals that graze. So anyway, there's a pretty tight connection between plants and grazers. So if you want to restore an ecosystem that's a grassland, you will probably have to have some grazers on it. So that's what really surprised me. But the science behind it, when it starts, they present it, it's like, yeah, So it's something that I wasn't particularly, it took me a while to accept, but I'll just encourage you to read up on it, because it's an important part of our ecosystems, that we have this balance. Of course, when you get things out of balance, things are going to go out of whack. So, it's really important, like I said, how you manage these animals on the land. We used to have lots of predators, so they kept moving. We don't have that anymore. We've killed all our predators. So, this is I think looking to Yellowstone with the introduction of wolves, there's been a dramatic change in that positive interaction with that ecosystem towards a much healthier ecosystem because there's now a predator and the grazers are having to move around. And they're not chewing on things that they shouldn't chew on. So anyway, that's another sort of parable that's sort of a similar story of reintroduction of predators has changed that ecosystem for the better. So, and it's kind of a closed ecosystem.
And
I
you
had a
got-
question about, and Belle said to jump in, so I'm jumping in.
Hi, Linda.
Hi. Yeah, I'm the one who asked about city parks, and I am concerned about them because I work with KCIW, our community radio station, and we have adopted Bankus Park in Brookings. And we pull weeds and pick up trash is about what we do. But I was over there, I think yesterday, and noticed that there's little colored beads sort of on the lawn and on around the new trees that have been planted. And I'm suspecting that those are chemical fertilizers or maybe herbicides or pesticides. I don't know. But I'm wondering what the best way would be to find out what the city's using and maybe encourage them to do more organic types of things in the parks, because we have quite a bit of park area in the city, and I think most cities do, and that's a good place to really try and do some organic practices. Although I think the problem could be too that the city park department doesn't have time to think about it. But I'm just wondering if there's, and it's a little bit touchy as far as me communicating with the park department because we're trying to keep them happy with KCIW, and so it's a little bit there's some things going on there. But I don't know if you have any suggestions about how we could make, and not just Brookings, but other cities in Curry County.
Right. I'm just going to pull stories from where I live. So I live in Port Orford.
Right.
And when they wanted to establish a community garden, they worked with the city and the Rotary Club. So the Rotary Club here helped establish the community garden. It still has the sign up above it. It's the Rotary Community Garden. You need to fence out the deer.
Yeah.
We have our towny deer, as I call them, and they will make short order of that entire garden in just a matter of minutes. So you have to have fairly high fences. We originally started out with wood raised beds, and those all rotted out. So somebody donated, or actually the Rotary Club purchased, the cinder blocks. So we use cinder blocks, which is, not necessarily a great building material, but it'll be there a lot longer than that pressure treated, chemical treated wood. So, you have to think about that. And every year, the dues for the community garden help purchase new hoses. The city donates the water, which is huge. That's a huge thing. So we have, I think it's about 50 beds and a little garden shed. And it's not huge, but a lot of people use it. So that's one story. There's a lot of different stories about community gardens. So you just need to find a group of people and, a relationship with the city that they will donate the land, and maybe they'll donate the water, which would be awesome. But we're very mindful of how we use that water so it's not abused. And I think it's possible. You need a piece of land, you need some committed people, you need, a little bit of money to put up some fences and get some water, need some hoses plumbed in, and and things like that. But once it's set up, there's not a lot of expense. So
But the thing is, and I think that's really important. If we could get some community gardens going, we had someone who was trying to do that for a while and he moved away. But my concern too is with the parks we already have that are actually parks and not gardens, but like grassy parks and parks for people to come and sit down. And we have the fountain they can sit around, and that has been a concern. I'm pretty sure they've sprayed the rocks around the fountain at Bancas Park because the horsetail type plants that were
Yeah.
there are all gone. And
yeah.
I can't imagine how you get rid of those. I mean, we pull some of them, but I'm pretty sure they've all been sprayed. And, I'm not sure how to get the city to maybe be more concerned about organic parks.
Yeah, I think, it's easy for them to go and spray once a year instead of, it's a cost issue for them. They have limited man hours, and that might be where friends of the park could step in and say, we will weed once a week so that you don't have to come in and spray once a year. So, but you've got to organize those people. You got to get them, and they got to do it every week, or that stuff grows up and then the city gets pissed off and then they come and spray it. And, it's just a, that continued drama. So I think, Deb, do you have a question or comment?
There seems to be a group of people here now that are, Fred Myers, the manager of Fred Myers, wants to do a community garden. SoCan would like to do a community garden, and Indivisible would like to do a community garden. So I think if we could go to the city and see if they can give us a parcel of land, we could do a small demonstration community garden for, to fight hunger in the community. It would be,
yeah, and I'm part of our Rotary Club. I'm actually the Rotary president for our club this year, believe it or not. And my thing is the community garden. That's like my thing. We allow, typically people pay $10 a year. But for people that live like in low income housing next door, it's like, hey, do you want a bed? And they're like, yeah, and they ask questions, how do you grow stuff? And we get free seeds, we get a big bag of seeds so they don't, here's some seeds, plant, and if you don't know how to do it, we have just extraordinarily talented gardeners that are there all the time. So it's, and it's great because they bring their kids over, they show kids how to garden. That's how I learned. And I think it's one of those great things. So anyway.
So I'll probably be calling you and picking your brain about how to get this maybe together, talk to all the different people and get some stakeholders together. I think having Fred Myers behind it is a big deal.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah. And if you want to come up, I think it's safe if you want to come up and meet sometime, and I can take you through our garden. It's not very big.
It doesn't have to be big.
Doesn't have to be very big. And it's pretty awesome. Yeah.
Can't tell if somebody is just talking in the background or asking a question. Well, I play this role way too often of getting things going, but that means at the back end, I have to shut down to respect people's time. And Anne's been with us for an hour and a half, actually longer, because she started early. And I just want to make sure, like you said, Ed, and you've graced us before, and we hope if we treat you right, you'll continue to give us talk.
I love doing this stuff. So, if I come up with a new topic, I'll let you know. But I've only given this once, actually about a year ago, this talk. And, when everything shut down, I love to go out and talk to people and learn from people. So yeah, I encourage everybody else to share what they have too. Sounds like there's some really smart permaculturists in your midst there. So this is a huge opportunity for all of us to contribute to mitigating climate change. So
Yeah, it's really
Thank
nice
you.
because it's such a mix of things. We can eat better, we can contribute to the overall health of the planet, and also deal with this existential problem that our children and their children are going to inherit. So,
And I'll also mention that if you buy food from local people, you're helping to support your community as well. You're keeping your dollars in the people that you live with. So, and that's incredibly gratifying.
doing well by doing good.
Yes.
Any other closing comments from anybody, or shall we let Ann and me go eat dinner? All right. Well,
All
again,
right.
Ann, thank you very much.
Well,
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Again, I've recorded
see your
this. And we'll let
faces.
people tune in on where it's going to be. All right.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Bill.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.